Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Leon Vainstein speaking from Los Angeles, California. We all understood that Biden could not run the country. I thought that Barack Obama was doing it, sitting in a basement and communicating through all sorts of devices and managing things over the internet. Actions of the White House. But honestly, I was expecting a stream of stories about how it was done. I also thought, well, about the stupidity of the escape from Afghanistan, that it was Jill Biden together with her son Hunter, or about the lack of response to China for all those balloon launches and the like, that it's the Biden family. So, being under the thumb of the Democratic Party, China twists things in every possible way and does everything so that China is pleased with their behavior. But it looks like I was wrong. It seems I was wrong because the reality turned out to be more mundane, as always, grayer as always, and more trivial. The truth turned out to be more prosaic. Now, gentlemen, you will find out just the latest news that has come in. By the way, translations of my videos into English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese will be in the description below. Send it to your friends whom you would like to listen, read, know, and so on, but who don't know Russian. Likes, of course, after watching. And in the comments, what would you like to know from me related to the United States of America? But let's move on to our topic to find out who actually ran America during Biden's 4 years. The Veritas Project Search for Truth, I've already talked about it, deals with exposing politicians, bureaucrats, and billionaires. It actually made such an unknown figure to you start talking. David Hogg, the youngest member of the National Committee of the Democratic Party of the United States of America. At lunch, without Hogg noticing, he was being filmed on video while at the same time being asked seemingly insignificant questions. Although he sometimes tried to hide something, nevertheless, he spread his feathers and showed off. And at the same time, he gave us information hidden from the country, while also adding a lot of unexpected and fascinating information that was no longer directly related to who was actually running our country. Well, I'll talk about that too, of course. I suspect that the rapid career of Hogg, who at a young age rose to become vice chairman of the Democratic Party of the United States of America, will at the very least stumble, if not come to an end. But Hogg is to a significant degree a rather repulsive figure. He supports defunding the police, stopping the deportation of illegals from the country, tries to take away weapons from the population, and supports anti-Semitic pro-Hamas movements in universities. Honestly, I don't feel sorry for him at all. So, journalists from Veritas set up Hogg and heard the following phrases from him. He, meaning the one who was running the country. Thank God in the past there was enormous power. I can't convey how much power he had in the White House. This is Hogg's phrase. And actually, everyone knew this. Everyone knew. Well, and lastly, I tried to avoid him. He scared me. Actually, everyone was afraid of him. Interesting, right? Well, now the video, secret recording.
Darian, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Yes, not for the record, of course.
For me, the main question is, how corrupt is the National Committee of the Democratic Party? Did so many people know, or did so few people know about the President of the United States?
The National Committee for Democratic Party will always serve as the President's primary campaign headquarters.
In the end, the more serious problem was within the inner circle around Biden.
That's all. And I can't overstate how much power the Chief of Staff, Jill Biden, had.
Jill Biden, Chief of Staff Jill Biden.
So, the one who ran everything under Biden was the Chief of Staff of the First Lady, Jill Biden.
It's kind of an open secret among the left, but honestly, I would avoid him.
He was, well, really scary. His name was M. Anthony Brown.
The name was given. The name was given Anthony Bernal.
I've never seen him. Exactly, what do you mean? He's just like a shadowy figure, kind of like the Wizard of Oz. That's what made him like that, because I knew what he looked like, but for example, the general public didn't know what this person looked like. But he had enormous power, and I can't convey just how much power he had in the White House.
On the way, Cog said that Nancy Pelosi plays the stock market, knowing exactly which laws will soon be introduced and how that will affect stocks on the exchange. She makes hundreds of millions of dollars on illegal operations. Cog claims that Congress is so corrupt that it would be better to burn it down along with all its inhabitants. And America would only benefit from that. Well, maybe he's right. By the way, here's his statement about Pelosi.
I would say that Pelosi is actually doing her job well. I don't agree with her stock trading. She outperforms nearly every hedge fund in the city each year.
Members of Congress make bets on the stock market using their unique knowledge because they are the very people who make or don't make the laws.
Some of these members of Congress make deals that are timed so perfectly, it's hard to believe they don't have insider information. They seem to be some of the best financial analysts in history. Have you spoken out against this?
I've spoken about this before, but I realize that if I start this fight, it'll be harder for us to get the gun control law passed.
I choose my battles.
I told Houck I'm not stepping out because my main focus is on my projects and plans, and I don't want to argue with people who are crucial for moving them forward.
The hardest part of my job is that I just want to burn everything to the ground because everything is so corrupt. But you must choose your fights and slowly create something new. We're not going to go against Pelosi. First of all, we wouldn't have beaten her anyway, even if we wanted to. You can feel it. That's one reason, but it's also an unnecessary battle when there are weaker members to target.
And I would say that Pelosi actually does her job very well.
I don't agree with this story about stock trading, but you don't agree. No. Some members of Congress make trades that are timed a little too perfectly for them not to have some kind of insider information. And that's a huge problem.
Do you think that's how Pelosi made it? Yeah? Hundreds of millions of dollars?
Yeah. I mean, she gets returns higher than almost any hedge fund in the city every year.
And you don't think that needs to change?
No, it does need to change. How would you change it? I would ban members of Congress from buying stocks.
By the way, if members of Congress can't buy stocks themselves, they'll immediately have a loyal friend or several loyal friends who will do it with them.
Because this will last for a long time.
There are 435 members.
Yes.
Most likely 430 of them avoid it for the same reason.
I'm just making a suggestion.
I think that's a pretty good assumption.
Supposedly, yes. Whatever is convenient.
They are among the greatest financial analysts in history.
The hardest part of my job is that I just want to destroy everything because everything is so corrupt.
But you have to pick your battles and gradually build momentum.
In the video, we haven't seen another participant in the conversation yet. That is Deterian Jones. He spoke a couple of times there, but the camera wasn't pointed at him. And he even worked in the White House, but I don't remember what position he held there, so he was in the loop, nodded, so to speak, agreed. So, in other words, we have the testimony of two people, not just one. So, Jill Biden, the president's wife, brought into the White House a group she called the Jill Team. The person we talked about became the de facto president. Who is he? An official who worked for Al Gore, then for Barack Obama, and for Biden. He is known for his absolute dog-like loyalty to his boss, well, to whichever boss he is serving at the moment. No one has ever elected him to anything. He has never put himself forward anywhere. He is a typical gray cardinal. He swore under oath in Congress that Biden is of sound mind and capable of making decisions. He oversaw the censorship of everything that happened in the White House. He controlled the president. And apparently, he was one of 4 people who decided which executive orders and laws would be signed with an auto pen. Well, that's the president's signature, but it's automatic. You see, I told you, it takes time for what's hidden inside to come out, for the beginning to come out. Now the investigation will begin, and it will take at least several months. Because those of you gentlemen who expect everything right away go drink some cold water. And that's because we need to learn to be grateful for the fact that we're not falling into the abyss, as we would have if what happened in November hadn't happened. But we stopped right at the edge, and now slowly, very quickly, but still slowly, we're moving away from the edge. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov reacted to the increased presence of German missiles and other military equipment in the theater of Ukrainian military operations.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that Germany's arming of Ukraine is evidence of Berlin's direct involvement in the war. He also called Germany's plans to create the strongest army in Europe alarming, reminding of the world.
Wars. Direct involvement in the war in Ukraine is already obvious. Germany is heading toward its downfall, as has already happened a couple of times in the past century. I hope that the responsible politicians in this country will draw the right conclusions and stop this madness.
The Germans, said Lavrov, started the First and Second World Wars and paid the price. They should now realize that a third time could end in tragedy. And what do the Germans themselves think about this? Here is what their chancellor is doing.
To give Ukraine a chance to fight back, since right now it doesn't have the capability. So I think he is using this opportunity to send a signal, and he is also carefully considering his upcoming trip to Washington in this context.
But developing their own long-range missiles is something that will take time, just like many other aspects of German military support, from Leopard tanks to Taurus missiles, which still haven't really been discussed properly.
No, I think they'll hold on to this trump card for now, but in the end, essentially, they'll tell Ukraine, if you build this, you'll be able to use it. As stated earlier, this is a significant signal for both Ukraine and Russia.
I see. Again, the question is how much Berlin should be concerned about Moscow's statements. What could be the consequences?
We've been hearing similar threats since you sent 5,000 helmets to Ukraine. This is intimidation from their side. And when they say, as Sergei Lavrov just said, stop the madness, it's actually them who could stop it as soon as tomorrow, but they have no intention of doing so.
It seems that in Germany they believe Moscow is bluffing with its threats and is planning to transfer technology and know-how for the production of long-range missiles to Ukraine. The chancellor will soon fly to Washington and believes that Trump's dissatisfaction with the Kremlin's actions will help convince America to help Ukraine more substantially than Biden has done.
The expectations are huge, not only in terms of Germany taking on a certain role here, but also in ensuring that Europe has the partners necessary to send a collegial, yet at the same time tough message not only to Russia. I also think that perhaps Mr. Merz will go to Washington next week or the week after to say the same thing to Trump. This is important. Now, he is a key figure. And as it seems to me, he is answering the long-standing question, where is Germany's leadership? Now he has this role.
That is, this is a sign that Europe is taking on more strategic responsibility, and Germany is at the helm. Tell me about the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, who invited Ukraine to negotiations in Istanbul next week. How serious do you think these negotiations will be?
A question for Jackson Zonsu, the chairman of the Marshall Fund. Then Lavrov invited the Ukrainians to negotiations. Do you think this is serious? So he gave such an answer.
I think it's very hard to predict. It all depends on who comes and who meets with whom. Obviously, last time things didn't go very well. I think the seriousness with which we should approach this was exactly expressed by Chancellor Merz. I'll believe it when he actually sits down at the negotiating table.
That's how Zox and Zons interpreted his Trepotnia. To understand what will happen to Ukraine after the war, you need to understand how the war might end. Let me break it down. From my point of view, all the options. They say there are 4. I thought and thought and thought, but I only know 3. First, Russia captured 0 of Ukraine. Second, Russia captured part of Ukraine. And third, Russia captured 100%, meaning all of Ukraine. For the first option, one of the following events needs to happen. Ukrainians invent a weapon of unprecedented power and successfully use it. The second option is that Ukrainians find someone who brings or delivers a weapon of unprecedented power and successfully uses it. Or third, some kind of turmoil, revolution, chaos, or confusion happened in Russia. Clans are fighting, troops are urgently returning home. And so far, honestly, none of the things I listed are expected at the moment. Well, history is a strange thing, life is a strange thing, anything can happen at any time. And Putin's departure, any departure, does not mean chaos or a rejection of imperial ambitions. So the first option, well, for now, is not visible. That was the option with Ukraine, meaning Russia captured 0 of Ukraine. That is, Ukraine owns 100% of its land, as it did before 2014. The third option. Maybe if the press manages to convince the people to keep dying for the land and indivisibility, then over time, there will be very few Ukrainian servicemen left. Russia has about 10 times more rockets, mines, shells, and bullets, and so to speak, 1.5 or even 2 times more capability to bring in people who shoot. Yes, by the way, right now they're dealing with the Chinese, hiring them for work, and it seems like they've sent Koreans too, so to speak. Maybe they'll send them again. That is, they're constantly looking for ways to send more bodies there, people they absolutely don't care about, as they say, whether they survive or not. In other words, because of the advantage in expendable resources, as it were, these expendable resources are both the living, the flying, so to speak, and the exploding ones. They will move slowly, but they will advance toward Kyiv without external help. And Europe, well, even considering that Germany has started to help with something, it really can't, for the most part, help with anything. 5, seriously, yes. And now China is helping the other side, while the United States doesn't want to get involved in other people's conflicts. But Ukraine can't win the war or hold its territory without external help, and it can't maintain it either, again, without external help. If anyone thinks that the United States owes something, then no, gentlemen, they don't owe anything. And as for someone telling me that Nuland came and persuaded them, well, there are adults living in Ukraine, they could have been persuaded, or they could have refused to be persuaded, right? That's why they were elected or appointed to various positions, so that they would think with their own heads, not with Nuland's head. And even if it's Biden or Obama or someone else, so what if he said something? We have 45 million of our own people. We should be able to, well, I don't know, approach all the advice we're given with a critical mind. So, once again, without external help, Ukraine can't win, can't hold on, can't survive. And then it won't be Ukrainians or us who decide Ukraine's future, but the Kremlin. And we can, of course, analyze and speculate about this. But most likely, Russia will treat Ukraine as a colony and simply extract its natural resources and agricultural products. so to speak, without thoroughly considering the nation's progress. Let's say, as in Imperial Russia, they call it Okraina or Okraina. There remains the second option, namely that Ukraine retains part of its territory, not all of it, not zero, but a part. And if we consider the scenario where Ukraine controls 100% of its territory, I would give, well, let's say out of 100%, I would give 0.001% to the scenario of capturing 100%
of Ukraine.
I would give 20 to 25%, and to the scenario of dividing Ukraine into two parts, one part held by Ukraine, the other by Russia, I would give 75 to 80%. That's why I think that at some point, really, the Ukrainians will get scared like being hit on the head with a sledgehammer, and they'll start saving whatever they can. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you once again that what I'm saying is an analysis. It's not something I would want. Maybe I would like parallel and straight lines to someday merge into one nice long curve, but they never do. There's nothing I can do about it. There. So if, as I already said, it hits the Ukrainians, I hope that someday this idea will hit them like a sledgehammer, and then they'll start saving whatever they still can. By the way, it looks like both Arestovich, Zaluzhny, and Trump are saying the same thing that I just told you. If in 2014, Russians specifically wanted Crimea, taking advantage of Yanukovych's ousting, then by 2021, they wanted a federal system and for Ukraine not to join NATO. Now they want to de facto and de jure annex several Ukrainian regions to Russia. Also, possibly over time, and as they advance deeper into the territory, the further they go, the bigger their appetites will become. They will want even more. I honestly don't know anything else. By the way, Russian propaganda has convinced Ukrainians to hate Trump and not to accept any solutions to the problem from him. This hatred is incredibly beneficial for Russia. They support a whole group of Ukrainian bloggers and journalists to fuel hostility between the United States and Trump. And between, let's say, the United States, not just the United States and Trump, but the United States, Trump, and the population of the country, the population of Ukraine. This is a huge, huge success of Russian propaganda. The idea of it's better for all of us to die than to give up even 5 meters of our land is, of course, welcomed by the Kremlin. But let's get back to our scenario. Option 2, Ukraine controls part of its territory. That is the option to which we gave about 70, 75 to 80% probability. And for the sake of discussion, it doesn't matter whether the dividing line is closer or farther. What matters is that an independent, sovereign Ukraine continues to exist, and it decides for itself. On the territory where it exists, it determines its own future development. What possible paths of development are there? There are two options, as we call them. Well, the first option is the same as before: corruption, theft, oligarchy, and so on, and so on. The second option is a country with a free market, that is, complete liberation from such, well, corruption. It remains. It's one thing when it's within limits and people are afraid and nervous about being exposed. But it's another thing when it's just out in the open. Oh, honestly, I just sneezed. Oh yeah, so the country is free in the market, as I already said. And third, it's a mix of 1 and 2. If the United States starts, well, actively participating in the development of those very minerals we've talked about for so long, so that's number 1. And most likely that's exactly what will happen. Nothing changes, it's just that instead of foreign slave owners, our own slave owners return to power. The country is developing slowly, there's only partial recovery, the contributions from global charitable organizations are being embezzled, the economy isn't recovering, the middle class isn't forming, and millions are facing hardship. And the thought comes, should I go abroad to earn money, or should I just waste away here? And they leave for freer and therefore more developed countries. Path number 2. As I said, I give this a 1 in a million chance. It's unclear where honest, convinced people will come from who also understand how to build an economy. After all, the world will invest in Ukraine, then everything will grow like yeast. And you need to know how to manage this. You must not become corrupt, and you must not become the same kind of sellouts as those who, so to speak, since some year, I don't even know when. From 1899 to 1990, Ukraine was not allowed to develop. But in the scenario of a free market and freedom, Ukraine becomes the center of a 100 million strong region. That's Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia, the Baltics, Czechia, and maybe Hungary with the highest growth potential. 10 years after the end of the war, the German-French-Italian complex will be forced to start restructuring and modernizing because it will start losing not only to Southeast Asia, but now also to Eastern Europe. The standard of living is rising, and Ukraine is starting to be called the new America or the new Kalendake. A union is being formed, one that England is getting used to. This is not a state like the European Union. It's a military-industrial alliance with more or less similar laws, but with national identity. The laws are based on the British Code, on law plus the Ten Commandments. The countries of the Union close their borders not between each other, but according to the principle of the United States of America. The reason is that there are more and more and even more people. A large part of the world wants to become part of this amazing rise. How to participate? By investing, and also by participating, working from scratch, from a completely destroyed country to the stars, to what is called. But, as I already said, it is necessary to get rid of corruption, and this most likely will not happen. This is at the level of a miracle with Martian weapons that will cleanse Ukraine of the invaders. Now let's discuss path number 3. So, a mix of oligarchs and the United States of America. Let's say the United States of America decides to organize or move forward with this fund, which Zelensky and the whole nation believe Trump wanted to destroy. I hope that we, the United States of America, won't get involved in this, but let's imagine that we did. So, part of Ukrainians live by their usual bandit laws, where there is no truth or justice, and part is under the control of the United States of America. It is engaged in the development of minerals, processing, storage, transportation, that is, railways, ports, and everything else. And the fund brings with it, so to speak, a non-Ukrainian armed security force. A situation arises in the country with two lifestyles, one where there are no rights. When you have a small bakery, it's fine. But as soon as you start to stand out, they immediately explain that you have no rights at all. Either get in line and, so to speak, be a servant. Maybe you'll have a chance to make it as a caporione or whatever it's called there, right? And if you have no money, no connections, you're nobody. Another one where advancement is based on skill, payment matches what you do, and you have the opportunity to challenge anything that's been taken from you unfairly. In the morning, people leave a world of banditry and corruption and arrive at work in a Western, or better yet, Americanized world, where, so to speak, corrupt judges don't work. There are no oligarchs, and police officers don't take bribes. And where, what's it called? Well, over there. Not everything is amazing, like we have there. Yes, but compared to what we've seen in all the republics of the former Soviet Union that collapsed, in Mexico, in Russia. Yes, well, it's like paradise on earth here. And out there, when they come home in the evening, nobody even calls you by name if you don't have money or connections. How will these two worlds coexist when the Americanized world keeps expanding all the time, and the oligarchic world does everything it can to stir up hatred toward the public, toward the Americans who have taken away their treasures? I don't know how this will happen. But right now, for example, if you look at it logically, it's clear that America genuinely wants good for Ukraine. But when you read newspapers, watch internet speeches by ordinary Ukrainians and so-called leaders and the mass media, it gives the impression that we've just come here and are about to start cutting and raping little girls. Such horror is caused, by what kind of idiot, scoundrel, bastard Trump is that he dares to want to stop the war. Well, they'll do the same thing for the extraction of minerals. So Ukrainians will fall into the same exact trap. And those who are yelling that Trump is an idiot, like Vitkov, Cretin, and all of us who voted for Trump are morons, I keep getting messages about this all the time. It's quite possible, gentlemen. Actually, my mom says I was 9 months, well, so to speak. Maybe I am a preemie. Maybe it should have been 10, who knows. So when the oligarchs get stronger, they will start trying to squeeze out the foreigners. That is, well, those who bring a normal life and laws. I think in the end they might be able to take over again. What was built with foreign money and what is pulling or has already pulled Ukraine out of poverty and hopelessness. And if you kick out the foreigners, well, what can I say? The country will start getting robbed again, the wealth will be taken out, only there will be much more of it than there was in 1990 when all that rampant theft, looting, cronyism, and the like began. That's it. So, ladies and gentlemen, of course, no one can predict the future. We can only talk about possible scenarios for development. I tried to provide percentages for different development scenarios to clarify their likelihood. I believe one scenario is the most likely, another is the least likely, and so on. Are there any scenarios that could happen if a miracle occurs? Are there any scenarios that are most likely to happen, knowing what has happened in the past 20, 30, 40 years at this point on the globe? Maybe something completely unexpected will happen, as it often does. At one moment, the Soviet Union was considered the most powerful, and the next day it disappeared completely. In one moment, America is building capitalism, and the next day we have environmental, social, and governance and globalization. And even those who say, wait a second, we were just building a free market, are told that they're, well, all sorts of bad words. So, does that mean anything is possible? Yes, I'm interested, gentlemen, in your opinion about what you find interesting to listen to, what topics you find interesting to listen to. I'm kind of getting ready right now. Yes, I have nothing or very little, let's put it that way. I understand what's happening inside the countries, except for the United States of America. But I think I understand a little about what's happening in the United States and what's happening between our country and a number of other countries. The topics I'm interested in are Russia, Ukraine, Israel, and to some extent China. Because it's just too big. It's pretty hard to run past an elephant without noticing. Well, that's basically it. Likes, of course, in 4 languages. I'm being translated now, and that's it. The links will be below. Send it to your friends and acquaintances. There's English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. Someone asked me about Italian. Not yet, but why not? At some point, we'll probably start. That's all. Thank you again. Goodbye. I created the subtitles.